In today's video, I am really on a journey to find just what is up with the Scholar and how are people actually utilizing its kit at the tippy top of bleeding edge writing. This video is really going to be hitting the data hard, and I'm going to be bringing up the coolest points that I've seen. Pulling up the top 50 groups that cleared Eden's Promise, we can see that Scholar is represented at 50%, which is towering above the other two healers. So strap on in because I want to go and do a deep dive into what exactly the Scholar is doing here. So as a disclosure of methods, I downloaded the comma separated value sheets and imported them into Google Sheets for analysis. In the future, I'm going to try and figure out the FFXIV API. I unfortunately had a roadblock with authentication of a client. I'm not sure what's going on down there. I'm trying my best, but for our purposes, this CSV method still works very well. But yeah, for future goals with this kind of video, I'm going to try and get that working. So the current data set is from 10 of the top 20 ranked groups on Eden Promise Savage that have cleared with Scholars. So let's open this up by talking about the Scholars damage profiles first. So Scholars DPS overwhelmingly comes from broil damage, which had an average of 107 casts, resulting in an average raid DPS contribution of roughly 7.7 thousand. This is followed by Biolysis with a significant margin, which is going to be our 30-second duration damage over time effect, which averaged at 13 casts, which is going to result in 2.2 thousand DPS. For the next bits of data, I want to give a little bit of context for anyone who might not be super familiar. So weaving is one of the most important parts of the Scholar's kit, really anything in this game, but especially Scholar, because they need to know when to weave in things like fairy abilities or Indom or Sacred Soil. This is extremely important to how they heal. All of that is really facilitated by casting Ruin 2. That is your primary weave spell, which is going to be doing significantly lower damage output than Broil, but that can have that penalty alleviated by a double weave of energy drainment if applicable. Take the example of using Ruin 2 on the GCD, then your first weave is Sacred Soil, and then your second weave is Energy Drain. All of a sudden we have 200 potency from Ruin 2, then we have another 100 potency to result in 300 total potency, and so that alleviates that damage loss. So with that in mind, we can see a trend here where Energy Drain is actually used quite a lot by these Scholars. Actually a hell of a lot if I'm quite honest, which is averaging about 23 casts and up to 29 casts, with the lowest use still being at 15. Your Energy Drain is far from a dead ability, do not be mistaken, it is strong. I am going to take this note here on Aetherflow usage though and skip ahead where we can compare it to some of the healing skills that consume Aetherflow and how often they were used. We can see that the average casts of Indom were 9, Sacred Soil 7, and Excogitation. I can't even say it with a straight face, so I'm just gonna leave laughing to the edit. Like, oh god, what happened to Excogitation here? I really don't know. And even with Lustrate, again, when we look at Lustrate, it's not popular for this data, but my point of all that is that Energy Drain is definitely taking the lion's share of Aetherflow stacks. There is nothing even coming close. Lastly, for damage, we can see Chain Stratagem resulting in an average of about 1.3k damage, which on average was lower than even Ruin 2's contribution. But it should be noted that there is a very wide gap between groups, which indicates some groups simply took advantage of Chain Stratagem more, and other groups, this is why whenever I talk about buffing others, you need to be very cognizant some people might not represent your buff well. You're definitely seeing a significant margin on that from the top to the bottom. So with damage aside, I want to really spend more time talking about the healing kit, because oftentimes you hear people say that the Scholar's healing is weak, and as someone who has definitely raised issues with the Scholar's kit in Shadowbringers, the healing part of the kit I have found actually really amazing in Shadowbringers. I have had no complaints about that. If I stretch myself really thin and I run out of all buttons, then I start to feel the pain. But is that really that different than Ast? I think only White Mage is the one that can keep going, but definitely digress. So looking at the data, our top skills for HPS are Indom, which is likely combined with Recitation for those huge spikes of healing, but not all Scholars used it that often, which is very surprising to me actually. Like, we can see that the minimum value was a staggeringly low 729.50, which our max was 4.8 thousand just from Indom, and that's a huge margin of difference. We could see that it was cast an average of 6 times in Eden's Promise. The runner-up is going to be Sacred Soil at second spot, which I did make a video about how bonkers awesome this skill is, and I really do mean it when I say that, and I think that a lot of people just didn't grasp the strength because it wasn't so clear. I think that's one of the deceptive things when we're talking about a lot of heal over time, especially over an area of effect like Sacred Soil, is it's hard to really visualize until you see the numbers like this. And it's pretty clear from here, this is an HPS powerhouse averaging at 2.3 thousand HPS, and the max was a mind-blowing 4k HPS at an average of about 4.5 casts in a fight. But it should be noted that Sacred Soil has almost 25% of its healing done as overheal. That's not a huge deterrent because it is a heal over time effect over an entire party, so that is to be expected to some degree, but it is worth noting. Whispering Dawn is another sleeping powerhouse. This small OGCD weave contributes an average of 2k HPS and a max of almost 3k HPS with an average of just under 5 casts. Relative to anything else in the Scholar's Kit, Whispering Dawn also resulted in the most overheal, averaging at a pretty spooky 41% overheal, but just like we just said, it's a AoE trickle heal, so that's kind of how it be. Now I want to talk about Embrace, which is probably one of the most interesting data points of all of this, which is going to be that little consistent fairy chip heal that I've said it once before, I've said it twice, I've said it 100 times. This is one of the biggest perks of Scholar. It's that the fairy on its own targets and issues a small but very relevant heal over time. This was cast an average of 72 times in a fight and maxing out at 90 casts. This resulted in an average of 1.2k HPS purely passively, and I should say at no GCD and no MP cost. The max HPS was at a pretty crazy 2k, meaning that Scholar really wasn't letting EOS live rent-free. Damn. That's a lot. Another interesting thing about Embrace is when you cast Regen on other healers, you can notice that regen effect won't usually get the full tick out of it unless it's on a tank that's taking consistent damage. But because the fairy will target different allies and make use of their heal the best that you can, it is at a low overheal percent of 7.5%, and even the max overheal that we can get from this dataset is 12%, so that's pretty low. Now Constellation is here, which represents Seraph's big AoE heal plus shield that can be spanned twice in a row, and we can see that it's represented honestly really well here. It should be noted that we have 2 Seraphic Veil represented here in this data, which Seraphic Veil can either refer to the shield component of Constellation or to Seraph's spam Seraphic Veil ability itself. For those not familiar, Seraph actually gets its own complete overhaul of a toolkit, and so Seraphic Veil is just the equivalent of Embrace but Seraph, and that it will give a shield and a little heal component to it. And now we're really starting to get down to the more nitty-gritty, finer sand of this pond. Angel's Whisper is going to be the Seraph's equivalent to Whispering Dawn, so we can see here that interestingly enough, Scholars are very rarely using that heal over time effect while Seraph is out. The average cast is at 0.6, so obviously Scholars are using Whispering Dawn outside of Seraphic window. But what also does draw my attention is that we're seeing Fey Union down here, which is the premier big spender of the Fey gauge. We have Fey Blessing, yeah, but the big spender is going to be attaching the Fairy Tether to an ally. The average on this is cast only once and has pretty minimal overheal, but if not carefully managed, this can lead to a significant overheal, which the maximum value was 48.42. That is crazy. You needed to take that tether off of them. But on average, Fey Union was not providing that much value. But when we look at the max HPS value of Fey Union, that was almost 5 times the average at 929 HPS. And so someone has found the sweet spot of using this skill at literally 5 times the amount of HPS. Share your secrets with me, please. Where did you use this? Now we are at like the bottom of the barrel here, and we're seeing X Cogitation and Lustrate, which are 2 big hallmarks of a Scholar that are being used exceedingly rarely here, which is kind of crazy to me. Even Adlo is being really poorly represented here, but if we look upwards at the data, we can see Galvanize, which is the shield component, is much better represented, which really shows that the heal underneath the shield isn't providing as much value since it's really only being used probably before the tank buster. Excogitation though has a maximum number of casts at 3. 3, and then Lustrate at 1, which was, when I think about it, actually for Lustrate makes sense for Lustrate. And we are basically literally talking about the bleeding edge groups here, which is why our Lustrate is not as going to be valuable. Lustrate is an invaluable correction tool. If something goes wrong, you instantly have that there. It's very useful there, but if your group isn't making mistakes and is bleeding edge like these groups, it won't be that much used. And Excogitation is just likely not used because of other tools that are being used to pick up the tank after a tank buster, or maybe the co-healer's just very attentive. Which leaves me at the point where I'm currently reassessing how much I use Excog with this piece of information. If I'm super honest, maybe I'm using it too much. Anyhow, that really does it for this overview analysis of the top Scholars and how they approach contributing to both damage as well as healing. Let me know in the comments what you personally found surprising, and I'm gonna be honest, to say the least, I am actually genuinely shocked about Excog. I know that I said that, but dang is that on my mind. I use it so often, but I'm like, wait, they're not using it. Oh no, I'm doing something wrong. Am I the only one having a moment like this when I'm looking at the data? Only me? crap.